Thank you, everyone. Welcome, Mike and Jimmy.
Thank you.
Looking forward to this conversation on the future of online media. And it's interesting that tomorrow, at the same stage, there'll be a conversation about the future of media. So hopefully we'll leave nothing left for those guys to talk about. So listen, the concept of the future of online media is always, everything seems up in the air. And if you're in the media business, it can be a confusing or tense time. Let's start by saying what in the future of media will actually be no different from the way it's been in the past. Jimmy, any thoughts?
I think what's not changing is, of course, it's still about content, it's still about great narratives, and it's still about building audiences. That will not change, irrespectively of what format, what platform we're on.
Yeah, I think that the brightest days of journalism lie ahead of us right now. I think all of us probably can remember when we saw an article, read something that influenced who we are as a parent, a teacher, a leader, a professional, and that will continue to be the case and will thrive.
So one of the big opportunities, it seems now in media is the fact that the format is changing, or at least it's up for grabs. You know, so much of online media to now has been driven by publishers who are still probably repeating the unit of what's produced is much like a newspaper story has been for generations, and it's meant to be consumed still largely by people reading in the web browser on the desktop. But now so many readers, perhaps the majority of them, are reading their news and consuming stories on mobile devices. And what opportunities do you think that creates for new ways of telling stories, breaking out of what has perhaps been the standard newspaper-like story?
I think if we think about that shift is almost as big as the shift we saw from print to desktop. And it's happened very fast. Over the last 18 months, in the US, we've seen our audience go from 18% on mobile to now being 60% of our audience is now coming via mobile devices. And it's a big shift in the way we have to program. It's a big shift in the way that we have to think about our stories. What we realized is that we can't just think that what we put in desktop will work on mobile. It's actually often very different formats. It's shorter stories. Often it needs to be done with a different picture. So the whole setup is different. And the other side of it is, of course, also the monetization. As audiences shift to mobile, we, and I think the industry, is tasked with finding out how can we monetize that audience in a better way than just with traditional banners. Personally, I'm a big believer in online video on the mobile. I think it's a great experience. I believe that native advertising will be something that will be able to bring monetization to the mobile platform. But it's a fundamental shift, and it's, as I said, happened very fast, so it's something that obviously we think a lot about.
Yeah, and to build on that, I look at the web now as having changed dramatically from an architectural point of view. It used to be that you had a web page linking to another web page, and that was the web. Today, what we have are people linking to web pages, and people linking to other people. So you have this curated web, this social web. And yet we browse that web using the traditional browser. And so I think what that means for publishers and for content is that increasingly you'll see content be atomized. It will be packaged by editors in a package, but then it will also be meant to be atomized and spread throughout that whole social web, where people can pick up that content and reassemble it to map a point of view that they have. And that's a very, very powerful thing that we're just beginning to start to see happen now.
If I can actually build on that, because I think it's an interesting point. I think right now the internet, there is information overload in many ways, also when it comes to news. If I look at HuffPost as an example, we produce 16 or come out with 1,600 stories on a daily basis. Yeah. That's obviously way too much. You're not going to read 1,600 stories. On average, people read between 15 and 20 stories on HuffPost. So how do we make sure that actually we get across with the stories we want to get across with to an audience? And I think the next iteration, not only on mobile but on desktop, is really how do we use technology, passive personalization and those type of technologies, so we make a better product. So over time we build a more personalized experience for the audience, because I think that is what we need to do, because otherwise it's going to be a race to the bottom in terms of we will have to keep creating enough stories to keep the news beast alive, because social media has really accelerated the news cycle. News now needs to be updated on a second, not even a minute, on a second basis, right? People want to see what's trending on Twitter, and they want to make sure that they're updated all the time. And to play that game, you need a lot of content. You can't just resurface all the same content all the time. So I think, passive personalization across platforms will be another way that we will hopefully get to a point where we can personalize and create better experiences, so we don't have to create 5,000 pieces of content.
And you are even adjusting the time of day that you're publishing stories because of the shift to mobile, right? I mean, how does what I see as a reader change based on time of day?
No, that's right. We've spent a lot of time on the programming side as well. As I said in the beginning, we thought we could just take our desktop experience and move it to the mobile. And if we stayed with that, we would have made the same mistakes that a lot of publishers did when it moved from print to desktop. You can't just take a newspaper, put it online and think it works. It's the same. You can't just take your desktop stories, put it online, put it mobile and think it works. It is really a different experience, and also the consumption patterns are different. So for us, the huge part of our mobile consumption is in the early morning until 10 o'clock, and then it's kind of like from 5 when people are leaving work. But when they're in work or at university or where they are, they're on the desktop still. And it's a very, very different way of thinking about it. So when it comes to the news is breaking, and we'll publish the news as it comes, but the stuff in lifestyle and entertainment and business and tech that are not necessarily news-driven needs to be programmed when people are there, so we don't have to kind of resurface content that we published 9 hours ago. So we need to be better at targeting and programming and putting it live when we know the audience is there. So that's what we're trying to do on the mobile platform a lot.
It's interesting, Mike. So much of what you do on Flipboard is beautiful, and it's so useful. I love it as a reader. It brings great stories together from wherever they happen to originate. But so much of what you said about this atomization of stories is actually kind of scary to a lot of publishers, because the name of the game is to build an audience. And we all tend to think in the publishing business that here are my readers, I need to serve my readers, my audience. But your reader, in truth, can be anywhere and anybody at any given time. So how should publishers think of building an audience and growing the scale of their audience, when really you might read a given story and then you're going to read 14 more that are by 14 different publishers, right? I don't necessarily even stop to spend so much time thinking about who provided this story.
Yeah, what's interesting is the way that you think about your content tends to map to the package that it's going to be in. So if you're going to write, if you're part of a newspaper that prints every day, the way you think about the article, the way the article is put together, when it's published, how everything about it is influenced by that daily package that goes to print. Now, if you think about the world that we're moving to as really a network of people. So your audience is networked. It's a network of people who may or may not even know that your publication even exists, right? But you're going to write about a topic that they're interested in. And so if you think about the atomic unit of your media business is that piece of content, and you design the article to be read and consumed by that network on a continuous basis, and to be repackaged in lots of different ways, then I think that you think about it very differently. Also, that applies to the business model as well, because you want to build the economics of your business into that atomic unit of the article, and not have to be dependent upon people coming to your website and only looking at that one package in order for you to monetize. So it's a really, really interesting way to think about how you produce content. And it's more continuous, it's more networked, You think about how your content looks side by side other content. You also, by the way, you can repackage your own content. You can atomize your own content and repackage it and resurface things that maybe were relevant 3 months ago and bring them back. So for example, the New York Times on Flipboard has a magazine that they create on Flipboard called Putin's Rules. And they take all of their coverage on Vladimir Putin and put it together in this magazine. And then they'll tweet it out to all of their followers. And then people will go and read, articles that are written right now, as well as stuff that was written, 5 years ago.
So that actually feeds perfectly into what I was hoping to talk about next, which is the business model and how that's changing. So if you don't want to be reliant on a display ad on your website, which in any case, the value of which is dropping precipitously. So we've seen this huge rise of whatever you want to call it, promoted content, native ads, whatever. This is a huge new business opportunity for publishers, but it's tricky, right? I mean, in a lot of cases, good content is hard to produce, and you don't want to be putting just anything in front of your readers. You've cultivated this reputation. So, Jimmy, I know at the Huffington Post, you guys have built a pretty big crew of people who evaluate partner content, help create it. You've built this sort of studio within the company. Tell us a little bit about how big it is and how important it is to the Huffington Post's revenue.
It's obviously one of the new ways of monetizing an audience, and to do it in a way that's quite native to the platform. So native advertising and branded content is something that over the last couple of years has really increased in importance, not only for Huffington Post, I think for many publishers out there, but obviously we have a scale where it's very interesting for people to build content programs on our platform, because we reach 100 million people. We have 100 million UVs on a monthly basis, so we have a certain scale when you actually create content programs that sits on HuffPost. So basically what we've done is to help advertisers or brands kind of get into this space. We've built what we call HuffPost Partner Studio, which is basically 40 people, editorial and strategists sitting in HuffPost on the business side, working with brands on leveraging our technology, our data on what works, and also working with brands on what are the stories, what are the brand strategies or content strategies that they need to put together in order to be relevant to and connect with our audience and engage them in a dialogue. And these investments, obviously, from a brand perspective, gets bigger and bigger. People have now been doing it for a couple of years, so we're seeing people putting millions of dollars into these types of programs. And it's the thing is, it's a big commitment because it's an always-on approach, meaning that it's not something where you do a lightning strategy, which is how you normally do media. It's something where you commit to a brand purpose, a bigger purpose that you want to articulate, and then you keep it alive for a long period of time. We've had programs with Johnson & Johnson that have been on our platform now for more than 3 years. And as I said, it's a big commitment because you need a lot of content to actually keep it relevant. But I do think, just like HuffPost, as I said, we need to produce a lot of content to have a dialogue and be relevant with our audience. I think brands today need to realize that it's not just about a banner ad. It's really about content if you want to have conversation. You need that conversation starter, and content is a great way of doing that. So we actually see that brands in some ways are becoming newsrooms, in the sense that they need to understand the rhythm of producing a lot of content. And a lot of them obviously are not set up to do that at this point in time because they've been used to buying traditional banners and do more traditional buys. Whereas obviously if you want to do content, you need editorial people, you need a different approach to things. I think over time we'll also see brands building those type of things in-house, but at this point in time, that's not the case.
But so much of this kind of ad arose because advertisers wanted something to stand out, and for now it stands out. What happens in 3-4 years when everybody's rolling out these kinds of sponsored or promoted content, native ads, whatever, and then to stand out, you've got to do something else. What could that something else possibly be?
No, I don't think it's going to be, because this is not about being controversial. It's really about being relevant and wanting to articulate something. If you look at some of the things that's been successful on our platform, Johnson & Johnson is a program about global motherhood, a CSR program they're running. If you look at Chipotle, it's food for thought. They're addressing things that our audience anyway would find interesting. So it's things that are native to our platform, and that's why I think as a publisher we obviously need to be true to what we are, because we're in the business of building a big audience with relevant content, and if we start to put on programs that are not true to that, it's going to fall off a cliff. So obviously we have a big responsibility to tell brands that this is not going to work, otherwise you're right, it will obviously fall on off a cliff, and you will have to be very controversial to get it to work.
Can you share what percentage of Huffington Post's advertising revenue comes now from this kind of sponsored content versus the traditional display ads?
2 years ago it was 0.
Yeah.
This year we expect it to be around 30%.
And what might it be in 2 years?
In 2 years, as video becomes part of this, I see it goes to 50% without any doubt.
So what's the role for a curator or an aggregator like Flipboard of advertising in this native? You're not going to be creating content. I've heard you say you don't want to get into that. So you're still your advertising is it's not a knock, but it's more traditional. It's a beautiful display ad. How do you think about advertising in the role of a curator, aggregator?
Well, Flipboard is about a platform for great content to find its audience, for it to look beautiful in mobile, for it to be picked up socially, and for there to be conversation around it. That's what our platform is all about, and that works great for content from publishers as well as content for brands. Now, of course, you have to have high quality content. I think one of the smart things that Jimmy's doing is creating a studio to help brands who don't have the expertise on what it takes to create a genuine, piece of high quality content around their brand. Some brands get it already. Look at GoPro, great example of beautiful videos, amazing videos that get you to want to go and buy a GoPro camera. Right. Or if you look for a more traditional example, in Vogue, you would never buy Vogue without the ads. The ads are part of the content, and those advertisers have honed a capability over the years to build, ads that feel like content. So when it's well done, then our job is to get as much of an audience to that content as possible, and that's done through a combination of algorithms, algorithmic curation, as well as human curation. People should be able to pick up and share really high quality content, whether it's done by a publisher or a brand. So if you find a great GoPro video or a great video that Jimmy's team produces for a brand, equally that type of content should be able to be curated by algorithms and people so that it reaches maximum audience.
So the one thing I can't help but think in this, all this talk about creative studios and the scale, that you can offer to advertisers is this is also supposedly this age of participatory and democratized media. Anybody can become a publisher, and yet if the path to success or to sticking around, is to get revenue through these sort of high touch, high effort ad services. I mean, you're employing a creative studio. If I were to start a web publishing startup at this point, I don't have the resources to do that. So what's the future of the small independent web news or media startup in an age of where most of the revenue is coming from native ads?
No, I think there are different things you buy when you buy media, and sometimes you buy scale and reach, which is obviously what you can get with HuffPost, but other times you're buying a niche audience. So it really depends on what that startup is doing. But I think as a startup with a niche audience, you can still do native programs. Obviously you can't hire a lot of people because you don't have the money to do that, but you can still work with freelancers to create that. When you have when you have some advertisers that want to sit on your platform, you can still quite easily engage freelance people to work with you and create the right kind of programs and still make a healthy margin on that if you have an interesting audience for advertisers. So I think this is not only for big publishers like HuffPost, it's definitely also for more niche publishers.
Is there a way that small niche or startup publishers get access to Flipboard just like
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I mean, the future's never been brighter for somebody who is a really high-quality content creator, because now, these days, you can use platforms that also have audiences built into those platforms. And you can reach a very large audience in a very short period of time without having to build your own mobile apps on Android and iOS, without having to build your own CMS system, and without having to do like lots and lots of SEO. You can build a high-quality piece of content and start, from building it on a platform that already has audience attached to it, and then that audience will find that content through curation, right, through algorithms, et cetera, and that's very, very powerful.
But I mean, are you really putting that much partner or originated or native ad content into Flipboard? I mean, it seems like your curators are under the gun to really make a high-quality flipping experience for me. How often are they choosing something that originated with, I don't know, IBM or Procter & Gamble, just to pick on something?
Well, again, it comes back to the quality of the content. Look at the great Geico ads. Those video ads they're incredibly funny. Or look at the GoPro ads. Or look at a beautiful fashion, shot of incredible scene of somebody wearing an amazing, gown or something. I mean, these are things that I think people like to see, but it has to be genuine. It has to be high quality. If it's not going to thrive.
All right. Well, that's all we have time for. Thank you very much, Mike and Jimmy. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.